Hey there, today I'm going to be testing the Intel Xeon X5670 in Cyberpunk 2077. I am pairing this CPU with 16GB of DDR3 RAM at 1600MHz. Ignore what Task Manager says, it doesn't know what it's saying. It is 1600MHz, not 800MHz. I am pairing it with an SSD for the game drive and the boot drive, and also a Nvidia RTX 3060 for the graphics card, which has the latest Nvidia drivers. Starting off, I am testing the game at 1080p on the low settings. I'm going to be using FSR 3 for all of the tests, and I am using the quality FSR preset. Either way, at those settings, the game was running alright. It was getting around 52 frames per second on average with a 1% low of 29. So, not horrible, it's not the best, but it is pretty much a 30 plus FPS experience at all times. When driving fast through the city, sometimes the frame rate did drop down to around 37 for about a second or two, but other than that though, it was a pretty good experience. And the FSR 3 has an option called frame generation. It's basically AI generated frames, and it sometimes doubles the frame rate, and I tried that out, and yeah, in this case it was pretty much doubling the frame rate. The average went all the way up to 106 on average with a 1% low of 45. It's amazing. Next I tried 1080p on the medium settings, again with FSR 3 set to quality, and I was not using frame generation. And the frame rate was 54 on average with a 1% low of 32. By the way, for all of the settings I'm testing, I'm also not using motion blur because I just do not like motion blur. It doesn't affect the frame rate. I just, again, don't like the look of it, so I choose to leave it off. Either way, the game's running pretty good on the medium settings, especially for the age of this CPU, almost 15 years old. Then I tried frame generation on the medium settings, and that didn't quite feel as smooth as before, which is kind of weird because my monitor is only 60Hz, so I should in theory not feel more stutters, but it does feel more stuttery with frame generation enabled. But then again, the average frame rate is 84, and the 1% lows are slightly higher, so maybe it's just me. I don't know for sure, but either way, it runs pretty good. Then I tried 1080p with the high settings, frame generation turned off on FSR 3 set to quality, and the game was running weirdly similar to the low settings. All out so far, low, medium, and high run pretty similar, although high it does struggle a little bit more. The 1% low is 27, and the average frame rate is 50, so it's again ever so slightly lower than low, but not lower than low as an exaggeration. I mean lower frame rate than the low settings, but overall it still is running quite nice. Then I tried frame generation again, and the game was getting around 89 frames per second on average with a 1% low of 41, and once again it felt a little bit more stuttery at all times than without it, but then again the average frame rate is much higher and it felt more snappy at the same time, so maybe it's a win? I'm not exactly sure. And finally, I tried the Ultra preset, and the game actually was running notably worse. The average frame rate was around 42, and the 1% low was around 25. Outside of the city, it was hovering around 55 frames per second, but as I got into the city, the average frame rate went from 55 to 45 to hovering in the mid-30s, sometimes dropping below 30, which was quite odd, but then again, it's the Ultra settings. There's high crowd density and everything, which makes it a lot more CPU intensive and a lot harder to run. But maybe FSR 3 frame generation will save us. And it kind of did and kind of didn't. So it did improve the 1% lows, and it did improve the average frame rate. The average frame rate got up to around 75. Although inside of the city, it was dipping to around 45 frames per second on the regular, which is not very good with frame generation. It felt pretty stuttery. But the thing is, it still was a pretty decent experience, which is very, very impressive for the age of this CPU. It is 14 years, 7 months old. That is an extremely old age for a CPU to be playing a modern game, but it's doing it, and it's doing it well, which is quite surprising. Either way, if this video was entertaining or informative or anything above, make sure to leave a like or subscribe. That would help out quite a bit. Either way, thank you very much for watching this video, and have a great day.